Winter is coming and it's time to dust off that old chest in the attic where your mom keeps the old Christmas decorations. Rummage through it! And you might just find that video game memento you've been looking for all these years. My name is Patrick Hickey Jr. and I am the author of the Minds Behind the Games book series. And let's go ahead and open that wardrobe right here and let Castellan the Lion transport you to another nostalgia-filled past in This Week in Gaming History. As gamers, we've all asked the age-old question as to what game is considered to be the first of its kind, and a lot of people seem to agree it's Pong. They're not wrong, but they're also not right. See, it all depends on context. The very first video game produced was in February 1962, made by a group of MIT engineers and was actually called Space War with an exclamation point. This was never released commercially despite its popularity in the university where it was developed. This, however, inspired the creation of the very first commercialized video game called Computer Spaced, developed by Bushnell, who would later co-found Atari. Sadly, the game never took flight as intended, and Bushnell left Nutting Associates to put up Atari. When he also assigned Alan Alcorn to make a video game as a training exercise, Pong was born. Bushnell was so surprised at the quality of the game that he decided to have it manufactured. By November 29th, 1972, the game was commercially released. In the span of 2 years, they sold about 8,000 Pong units, and it took the fledgling gaming world by storm. In fact, it was so popular before its official debut that the prototype cabinet used in the local bar broke down to the huge amount of coins inside. Cha-ching! See, popularity also brings with it copycats, and Pong inspired a slew of bootlegs and ripoffs, but this didn't deter Atari and instead countered them by releasing Home Pong, a console version of Pong, and in 1973 released a sequel called Pong Doubles that featured 4 players, another first in the gaming world. So again, was it the first actual video game? No. But was it the first video game that launched a whole new industry centered on entertainment and fun? Definitely. Here's another video game inspired by real sports, specifically ice hockey. NHL 99 was released on November 30th, 1998 for the Nintendo 64 and was met with high review scores by different gaming publications with an aggregate score of 84%. Also had Eric Lindros on the cover. I mean, he was awesome back in the day. To make the game even more immersive, the Nintendo 64 version of NHL 98 faithfully represented the official NHL and NHLPA license, showing off all teams and players, including the Nashville Predators expansion team. Talk about bang for your puck. I mean buck. Speaking of immersive, Darryl Rioux returned from NHL 98 as the new series color commentator. However, he left after NHL 99. The play-by-play commentary was done by ESPN's Bill Clement. Like I said before, the game also featured Eric Lindros on the cover. Lindros was with the Philadelphia Flyers when this game was released, and was ultimately recognized in 2016 as an appointee into the NHL Hockey Hall of Fame. Nice ice, baby. Boom, 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 boom. Here's something to do in-game if you want to skate on thin ice while playing hockey. If you type the word Zambo anytime during the game, a random Zamboni will appear and start driving around on the ice skating rink, even if the game is ongoing. I hope that doesn't happen in a real live game though. Those things could be kind of dangerous. We're all dangerously in love with the Legend of Zelda franchise because we can't stop talking about how awesome the games have been over the years. Released on December 1st, 1988 for the NES, Zelda II, The Adventure of Link, was a direct sequel to the original Legend of Zelda. However, it deviated from its predecessor in terms of gameplay, introducing RPG elements and side-scrolling action. In addition to this, the game introduced elements such as Link's magic meter and the Dark Link character that would become commonplace in future Zelda games. It was also the first Zelda game to feature invisible enemies and also featured secrets such as being able to get past locked doors without keys by using the fairy spell and flying through the keyhole. Zelda 2 was slated to be released at an earlier date, but due to the 1988 shortage of ROM chips, yes, that actually happened, it prevented Nintendo from releasing most of its games according to their original schedules, including this one. Despite the differences it had with its predecessor, what Zelda 2 shared with it was its popularity, as the game was met with mostly positive reviews from critics and became one of the most popular NES games of 1988, with many retailers reporting that the game was selling out that year. The game ultimately sold 4.38 million copies worldwide. Now that's flashy. Speaking of flashy, the original NES Famicom releases of the game showed a rapidly flashing screen whenever Link dies. This was changed in the remakes to a blank screen, as the rapid flashing was known to cause epileptic seizures. Good thing they dialed down that kind of flashiness though. On a happier note, I'm glad they put Link's name on the title because, to avoid confusing Zelda with Link. Admit it though, before you got to play the game, you thought the main character's name in the original Legend of Zelda was Zelda. Yeah, I thought so too. You know who are masters at confusion, deceit, and stealth though? Ninjas. And who loves ninjas? We do. They've got to be one of gaming's best tropes, and that shows in Revenge of the Shinobi for the Genesis. Released on December 2nd, 1989, it's the sequel to Shinobi for the arcade. Revenge of the Shinobi was a masterclass in design and gameplay, and a lot of gamers and gaming critics agree that it is, in more ways than one, superior to its predecessor. It has received 5 stars and 9s across the board, and was even inducted in a lot of the greatest games list, notable of which is GameSpot's list for greatest games of all time. The game follows Joe Musashi as he finds his master bloodied and dying and his bride, Nako, kidnapped by the notorious Neo Zed. In a traditional side-scrolling action platforming game that features 8 distinct levels with its own set of enemies and unique bosses, Joe Musashi can also perform ninjutsu techniques and jump and attack simultaneously, hurling deadly shurikens at enemies. Now you think the game follows a serious plotline and story, but wait until you hear about the bosses. It's funny to think that a game of this caliber would actually be a huge target for copyright lawsuits from major companies owning certain popular characters. This is because in early versions of The Revenge of Shinobi, it had you fighting Batman as a boss. But because Sega failed to get the licensing rights for the Caped Crusader, he was replaced by a winged demon in later versions of the game. I mean, good thing they removed Batman from the game though. I'm sure he was prepared to beat Joe to a pulp. Funnily enough though, District 7's boss was none other than the big G-Man himself, Godzilla. Again, it was eventually replaced by a skinless dinosaur whose name was Monster G, which was obviously not a reference to a certain kaiju. Wink, wink. One of the other bosses is also very reminiscent of the Hulk. Spider-Man is also present in the boss, like the actual Spider-Man! The actual Spider-Man! This time though, they were able to use Spider-Man as a boss, which was eventually deleted too as soon as the license for it expired. Serious question. Who is this ninja guy? Is he like a dimension-hopping ninja, Thanos Darkseid, Ghidorah hybrid? But do you know who the real boss is? Joe Musashi is. The next game on this list is based on another game that is set in a hybrid world with aliens and dinosaurs, and involves a dimension-hopping, time-traveling warrior. Sounds confusing, huh? Enter Turok II: Seeds of Evil for the Game Boy Color. Not to be confused with the Nintendo 64 game with the same title, Turok II for the GBC was released on December 3rd, 1998, with low to middling reviews. Even IGN reviewer Peter Schneider described the game as an E-rated cookie-cutter side-scroller with decent controls and unimpressive visuals. It followed a completely different story from its Nintendo 64 counterpart, but was essentially set in the same world. You are Joshua Fireseed, badass name, right? A Turok, or a Son of Stone, tasked with protecting the Earth from multiversal incursions stemming from the Lost Land, a barbaric world which is a combination of all existing timelines. You are tasked to slash and gun down the Dinozoid army in 8 levels and battle 4 bosses using your wits and weapons like a knife, bow and arrow, pistols, shotguns, and more. Schneider may not have been impressed by the game, but let me give you a very interesting tidbit about it. Interestingly enough, the major plot points of this game are based on a comic simply titled Turok, published by Acclaim Valiant in 1997 and 1998. This follows Joshua Fireseed, also known as the Coyote Knight, who is essentially a new Turok after the mantle was passed down to him by his deceased uncle, Carl Fireseed. Although Josh was a new Turok, he had the ability to call upon the previous and future Turoks to act as his guide, in a style similar to Avatar: The Lost Airbender. As puzzling as the state of the GBC game was, I think this is an awesome piece of info, and it's best to experience the game and the comics hands-on. Speaking of puzzling, here's a puzzling challenge to boggle your mind, and I think you'd be interesting to know it involves our favorite monsters we all aim to catch: Pokemon! This game was released on December 4, 2000 and has undergone more name changes than your favorite ninja game in Europe. It was initially announced by Nintendo employee Peter Main's industry review webcast under the title Pokemon Attack on December 13, 2000. Its name was eventually changed to Pokemon Puzzle League, but it was released as Pokemon Puzzle Challenge. Puzzling, ain't it? Despite the name changes, what didn't change was the fact that it was a very well-made game, as it holds an aggregate score of 90.20% at Game Rankings, making it the 10th best Game Boy Color game and the 300th best video game on Game Rankings. Of course, they wouldn't put the word challenge on the game title if the game wasn't challenging, right? When at the difficulty screen in challenge mode, pressing select and A while hovering over hard mode will unlock super hard mode. Doing this again while hovering over super hard mode will unlock intense mode, the highest difficulty level available in the game. Talk about punishing yourself in a Pokemon game. Incidentally, there's a secret involving the weird human-shaped Pokemon, Jinx. Her losing animation features nothing but her detaching hair holding a white flag of defeat, similar to what happens when you defeat her in Pokemon Stadium. Like the Legend of Zelda franchise, Mario games have been a staple for Nintendo games ever since it was first released way back in 1983, and the next game in this list is a striking testament to that. Super Mario Strikers was released on December 5th, 2005 for the GameCube. However, this was the last Mario game to be released on the GameCube in Japan and North America. It didn't disappoint though, as it was able to reach its goal and was ultimately considered to be outstanding in its field. Oh, that's a lot of football puns right there. Hugga hugga. It sold a total of 1.61 million copies at the end of its development cycle, owing to its fun gameplay and tight controls. Before the game was conceived, however, game director Mike Englehart and marketing director Grace Kim revealed that Strikers was originally intended to be a more realistic Mario sports game, but that the development team opted for an over-the-top style after numerous consultations with Nintendo, which is a very wise decision in my opinion, because Mario games have always been over the top. In a lot of firsts for the game franchises, this is the first game to feature Kenneth W. James, who temporarily replaces Scott Burns as the voice of Bowser, a role that would become permanent starting with Super Mario Galaxy. This is also the only Mario Nintendo GameCube game to support 16:9 widescreen as well as 480p. Early concept art for the game allows Mario wearing number 10 as his team number, but this was ultimately given to Princess Peach as her number. In a first, breaking football tradition, Mario was given the number 1 as his team number, which is supposed to be reserved for goalkeepers. That is all for this week's video game history lesson. Which one is your favorite pick on the list? Or do you remember a different game released on these dates? Let us know in the comments section below, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you don't miss next week's installment of This Week in Gaming History.